Okay, hi, my name is Noam and my pronouns are they, them. When you say gender, you refer to like non-binary genders or like binary gender? Like, what do you mean by gender? Good question. I think I first learned about like genders, like non-binary genders in CEGEP, like so around like 17, 18 after high school. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I don't think we ever had like a proper conversation about like this gender is like this, and like they weren't really pushing like social constructs like on us when I was growing up. So we never really talked about it until I came out.
Something that really got you.
Yeah, I mean the first things that comes to my mind, like let's say the first TV show I watched that was really like kind of I could relate to is Skins, like the UK version. I think that's one of the first thing that I watched, like scene that I was like, okay, like I can relate to a character in a way. I think every TV show or movies that like had a trans character in it, like even in like Degrassi they had one. I don't really agree with like how they did it, but back then it was like very like special for me to just watch that. I'm sure there's more than this, but just anything from like even like Glee that I was watching back then. Mostly TV shows. I feel like movies now, like they were all very like they're all very dated and they're only just coming out now. And books I just read like nothing too serious. I'm more like a autobiography person. So like I just read Just Kids. That was nice. I could relate to, even though it was like a cis woman, but very fluid with her gender. So I would say that. Well, do I keep my eyes closed?
Oh, you decide.
Okay. I had like 3 bedrooms, so there was an evolution. But I always had like, I think so, like society would say like gender neutral bedroom colors, like orange and red, like gray. Even like my first like bedroom was very like green and red. So I think even just the way I was expressing myself was like not in a binary way. Like my parents were aware of that. If I can think about like other like gender, I wasn't really expressing myself in my bedroom. It was weird. It was more like music posters of like inspiration. And then at some point I had like a pride flag that was there in the corner. Yeah, that's what I can think of right now.
If I can
But,
ask,
yeah.
if you have one example of music that you can sing, if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I was really obsessed with like boy bands when I was younger. I think I wanted to be in a boy band. Just like I grew up with like Disney, like Miley Cyrus and like the Jonas Brothers and stuff like that. So that's what I had back then. But yeah, I think mostly online. Like I share a lot online about like gender and my experience as a trans non-binary person. I really try to educate people in like my work field. I'm a hairdresser, so I try to kind of break social constructs related to gender, like on a daily basis. Like every time I see like a sign like of a shop that's very like gendered, I'm working on very educating people on that and changing things in that industry. So I would say just like connect with other influencer, queer people from that industry. I do it a lot online. Yeah, well, there's a big one right now with like cis white people getting recognition for breaking the gender binary with fashion. So I think that's like one of the main conversation going on right now about like gender and like if they're the one who should be getting like the spotlight right now or like put forward because they're not the first one doing it. Yeah, there's a lot to say on that subject, but I think it's an important conversation that's going on right now. I think, because I'm 25, so I think I was right on the edge of like, I feel like the generation after me were like much more aware of like about gender. I think when like I grew up, nobody, like there was like one person out in my high school. I was going to a private school, so it was very gendered, obviously with like uniforms. So that definitely like stopped me from expressing my gender. So it all happened right after. I think I was just not aware of options for a very long time. Just like, I don't know, my teenage years were really shaped by like pop culture, as I mentioned earlier. So in a way, I was just very much focusing on like music and going to concerts and not really caring about like fitting in like a girl group of friends, let's say. But there was definitely that pressure of dressing up a certain way and acting a certain way and not doing like a sport, like, yeah. Confusing, if I'm being honest. Confusing, but it doesn't really matter if they understand it or not. I think right now they would describe it as not feminine, not masculine, kind of like not defined. I think it would be generational. What was the word you used?
Generational identity.
Generational identity, yeah.
Like your age group.
Yeah, I would go with that one, for sure. Do I have to explain why? I would go with that one just because I feel like we're like in it together. I feel like a big community, like family almost, like chosen, like there's a lot of chosen family, like we hear that word a lot, especially in the queer community, but I feel like it's more present and it's just like, it makes like the difference. I'm lost now, but yeah. Yeah, I think for sure it like puts a weight on your shoulders that other members of like my family don't have or like didn't have that I know of. It's just a lot of energy and like, but at the end I feel like it's worth it for me, but it can be very like not exhausting, but like it takes a lot of energy and reaffirming and courage in a way. But yeah, just have to remind yourself that it's for a reason and that you're doing it for all the generations to come. Yeah, I'm very like, I feel like I'm very much independent and I don't share a lot of like my personal like stories or what I'm going through. So for me to like have to talk about it and actually do like a coming out to like my family was just frustrating in itself because I don't understand like why we have to come out. So just that I have to do it for other people, not really for myself, in itself is frustrating. The first thing that comes to my mind would be just like to like not stop myself based on like what I'm supposed to be doing. Let's say like sports, I wanted to try sports, join teams, but I couldn't because it was mostly like a men's team at my school. So I would say that to like just try and like see how like I could have changed that, or like at least like try to change it instead of conforming to the rules, the social rules. I would say just like learning to be like confident in who I am would have made like well, makes a difference in just expressing myself, and don't really like compare myself to others, because like we are so like there are so many like labels, you mean, that like we like fit in, like
Labels, there could be restrictions as well.
I mean, they are like a restrictive aspect of it. I try not to follow those so much, but I mean, sometimes we have to. Let's say if I like, since like I'm referred as like trans mask, then I look more masculine, then I would have to change my gender mark for man, or like masculine. So that's one thing. What was the question again?
No problem. So does your culture or generation
Okay,
limit your
yeah.
ability to self-determine?
Okay, so culture. So culture, I would say that like in like a lot of times I kind of have to like put aside my gender, like non-binary, to like fit in again. Like I mean, I prefer looking more masculine than feminine, whatever that means. But for like generation, I would say that it's still, being non-binary is still misunderstood and expected that you look androgynous. So it's hard to detach yourself from that, because in the community there's a lot of judgment, or like assumption that if you're looking a certain way, then you're not, like people assume you're not non-binary, or that you're cis. Well, the first one, puberty for sure, because that's when things start to change, and like your body, and you're like, ooh, what's going on? Like that's when I first starting to feel uncomfortable with my body. I think after that, like it just, like moments like the famous like prom, and like how you're supposed to dress, and I was wearing a uniform, so I wasn't like we didn't have to wear like skirts or things like that, but people were doing it. When we had the chance to wear like our normal clothing, it was very hard for me to like pick something, because I was so used to like having that one uniform, which was kind of like a barrier, like a protection, because I didn't have to really think about what I wanted to wear. So that would be another moment, like just not wearing a uniform. And the last one would be, as I mentioned, like when I first learned about gender after high school, like on my own, meeting new people and friends.
I can give you examples. if it,
Yeah,
yeah?
I can think of some, but like,
Oh, okay.
I'm just, because barriers are like so many barriers. Like you can be yourself, like just I would say like safety. I mean, I feel like I'm lucky to live here and like be white and like sometimes cis passing, and have health care that allows for gender affirming surgeries. But if I think about traveling, that's when I can get a bit like nervous. Yeah, it made me think of when I said like earlier, like confusion with my family, like things like putting nail polish on will confuse them because I'm like trans mask, or and other like members of my family, then I feel like I have to shave because then my facial hair might be weird for them. So it's just like being over conscious of what I look like depending on where I'm going. Yeah, well, as I said, I'm doing that for like my work industry right now and hoping to help like younger generation do the same, or like open a path for them to make it easier for them, and just offering like gender affirming haircuts to my community and like affordable services for them, is a way that I think I can help. I don't want to be the leader of Quebec. Okay, I would like definitely add like mental health services into the healthcare system. Like, I mean, make it more accessible, and like normalize it. That's one thing I can think of. It's so hard. Just making room for more education on gender in the school system. Like stop hiding from people some information. And not employ people based on like their gender or their culture. Yeah, I think that's it for now.
That's perfect. It's perfect like that.
Continue what I've been doing and just like reaching out more to like people who need it. Yeah, really just that, continuing like offering education to help the community. We're done?
Yeah.